Well, I'm available to start at right tackle.
You can't see when I have clothes on.
All right. Well, there's not an even playing field. There's never been an even playing field. There never will be an even playing field.
What shampoo do you use on your hair?
You don't need to be Superman to play in this offense.
You're listening to The Red Zone.
Welcome, Badgers fans, to another episode of The Red Zone. I'm your host, Jason Galloway, with the Wisconsin State Journal. We are back this week after a very disappointing loss for Wisconsin at Michigan. We're going to bring on Jake Kocorowski from Bucky's Fifth Quarter to help us break down that game, exactly what went wrong, and go in depth there, and also look ahead to the rest of the season and what we can expect from Illinois when they come into Camp Randall Stadium this week. We're also going to have a quick chat with Rachad Wildgoose, the true freshman cornerback who's really come on for the Badgers the last couple games and is not expecting to redshirt anymore. So we'll talk to him about what he was expecting coming into the year and kind of how much more comfortable he feels now that he's got a couple games under his belt. But first, let's get to our interview with Jake. We are here with Jake Kocorowski from Bucky's Fifth Quarter for his second appearance in the Red Zone. How you doing, Jake?
Doing well. Thanks for having me back on, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Happy to have you here. Obviously, we're coming off, quite a disappointing performance from Wisconsin, 38-13 at Michigan. What are kind of your biggest takeaways? What do you think was sort of the biggest issue with the Badgers over the weekend that they need to really take a good long look at this week?
I think it's the offense where look at the third down conversions. With that team, it's so cliche. Of course, if you convert the ball on third down, you're going to keep moving and probably get points. But they're not. They got off the field quickly a lot. You talked to a couple players today, talking about miscommunication on the line when it came to the pass rush against an aggressive Michigan front that caused some pressure. But I think it's on the offense just working to get more efficient. And I thought the defense did an admirable job up to a point. It's a 2-score game late in the third still. But they're fighting through, and they had a couple of plays, but you're also playing with a depleted secondary that just got worse throughout the game. I think it starts with the offense and just getting more efficient.
Yeah, offensively, looking back on it, when I went back and watched the game, I actually, live you kind of felt like they ran the ball well early, but then they kind of tailed off. But actually, when I really rewatched it, I was like, they really kind of ran the ball pretty well all night. Yeah. And then I looked at the stats again. It's like 6.5 yards per carry, and if you take away the 2 sacks and the fumbled snap, then went for -2. I think it's up to close to 7.5 or maybe a little bit under that, 7.3, something like that. So they were running the ball, and I think the offensive line played well in the run game. So I think it was just a matter of not converting a lot of those third downs. They got in a lot of third and short situations. I think there were, if I remember correctly, there were 6 times they were in 3rd and 3 or shorter, and they only converted 2 of those. They had a couple breakdowns in protection, like you said, led to a couple sacks. And so they were getting themselves in the third manageable situations that they always want to get as an offense, and they just weren't. It just wasn't. They weren't converting. I think maybe looking in hindsight, maybe you could have ran the ball a little bit more often in those third and shorts. They've tried that a couple times and it didn't work either. I think Garrett Groshek got stuffed on a 3rd and 2 from a shotgun snap. But yeah, I think it just kind of piled up and snowballed on them once they couldn't convert a lot of those third downs. I wrote a third down story on madison.com yesterday that basically I was kind of looking back at their stats, and they're 23-0 under Christ when they convert at least 45% of their third downs, and this is their worst third down performance since Northwestern in 2015. So it was I think that's really what it comes down to. But
I was also disappointed too. Saying that too, you didn't see Alec Ingold with. I have a good joke with, or I try to think I have a good joke with Bucky's Fifth Quarter whenever we're doing games, talking about fullback dives on those 3rd and 2s. You didn't see that in the game, and I thought that was kind of interesting to, with Michigan and Wisconsin being kind of the fullback heavy teams, are the ones that still represent the position. You didn't really see a lot of Alec Ingold in those situations as well, in those short yardage. So I don't know if it was the game plan, and obviously I'm not a football coach, so I'm not, I don't have, that's one thing with fans too. Why didn't they go for it on 4th and 2? And that's one thing maybe to talk about. That's discussion debatable too, where you're at Michigan's 42-yard line late in the third quarter. down 2 scores and you decide to punt, but you trust your defense, which was playing pretty well at the point, but it was maybe getting a little gassed here and there too. But yeah, you didn't see a lot of Alec Ingold too, which I thought might be a key going up against a defensive line that didn't have Rashawn Gary there.
Yeah, I was surprised about that too, and maybe this Wisconsin coaching staff saw something when they were watching tape that we didn't know, that they made it seem like they thought that the fullback dive wouldn't really be there for them. But there were quite a few 3rd and 2s. I think one 3rd and 1 maybe where they had an opportunity where they could have pulled it out and didn't. I thought you mentioned the 4th down. It was 4th and 2 from the Michigan 42, and.
Yep.
I thought maybe they passed on 3rd and 2 before that for an incompletion. I thought maybe you at least maybe run the ball there, whether it's Ingold or not. Maybe you get yourself set up for a 4th and 1 and then you go for it, or maybe you pick it up. Would you have gone for that 4th down? I know you said you don't want to speculate on the reasons or anything, but if you were in that situation, would down 14 points in the 3rd quarter, 2 yards to go from the 42, are you going for that?
I think the way the game was going, let me just say, I don't fault the coaching staff and Paul Chris, and we've said it before as a disclaimer, they are football coaches. This is their life. They spend 80, 90 hours, probably more a week during the season preparing for game plans and breaking down games. So I don't have that level of expertise, but I would say I think when you have a 3rd and 2, and you try to offset and you try to throw off the defense, like maybe going for a pass, but you're also having Jonathan Taylor, who ran for 101 yards on 17 carries. He's gone over the century mark all year in all 6 games, and who looked good for the most part. So maybe on 3rd and 2, even if it's predictable, you still try to run it, and then you're still in 4-down territory, or where you can take that last down and maybe even get a yard. You'd expect your offensive line, which was playing, like you mentioned before, was playing well offensively in running the ball, but pass protection may be a different story. But you get them that little push and get 2 yards. Well, you're going to get that. You have that ability to either get the first on that 3rd down running the ball, or potentially having that ability to just get closer for a better 4th down conversion. So I probably would have gone for it, but then again, there's trust in that defense that was playing well up until that point. And then also, you think your special teams, like Anthony Nolati's been really good down in the ball with inside the 20-yard line for most of the season, and that didn't come to fruition. And you had a net yardage of 22 yards on that, so they got to 20. So you try to get them, you try to pin them back further, and you hope that the defense can dial up something to create some havoc or some turnovers, but it didn't come to fruition like many would have hoped to.
Yeah, I think it is easier said than done to pick up 2 yards against the Michigan defense when they know a running's probably coming, or they're expecting a run. That being said, I feel like they were kind of throughout the night passing as often as they did on 3rd and short. Maybe they were outthinking themselves a little bit. Maybe they should have. I think they were running the ball pretty well. So maybe in hindsight, maybe they would go back and run a few more times there. And I think as far as the 4th down goes, I think if you told Paul Chris before the punt, this is going to go in the end zone for a touchback, maybe he would have gone for it. If he knew the net was only going to be 22 yards. Maybe that changes his thinking. Maybe he thought Lottie could pin them inside the 10-yard line, or at least like the possibility of that option at least. I think I would have gone for it too. I sort of understand where they're coming from, because the defense had played well than you would think for a unit that had given up 21 points at that point. The touchdown drive they allowed on the first possession of the 3rd quarter. They had that roughing the snapper penalty, which they stopped him twice really. That Reggie Pearson had the great play on 3rd and 1. And forced that fumble, but then I think there was a penalty there. I can't remember what it was, maybe defensive holding or something like that.
That was the 3rd down that was on Wildgoose, a hold that Scott Nelson almost came down with the interception for. That was earlier in that drive. They almost had to stop there, like you said. And then with the Pearson forced fumble, a few plays later.
That's right. And that led to the roughing the snapper. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So twice they stopped him on that drive, but the odd roughing the snapper call especially was pretty weird to keep that drive alive. And then really in the first half they had one of the field goal drives came off the first Hornibrook interception where they started on the 15-yard line, and Michigan gained 0 yards on 3 plays and held them to a field goal. So it was a defense that had played pretty well up to that point. And so I think I guess what he was thinking was, let's pin him deep. Hopefully our defense comes through and we get the ball back. And so I don't know. I still would have gone for it, but I think it was I guess I see where he was coming from there, and Chris has never been a guy that's been too overly aggressive on 4th down situations, but Yeah, I mean that's just what it is, I guess. And at some point, it just kind of got away from him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the play of the game might have been, and there are plenty. Obviously, you have an 81-yard run by Shea Patterson. You have, they gave up yards. They gave up over 400, 444 yards against Michigan's offense, which isn't great, obviously. But I felt they played really well the first 3 quarters, and then on top of that, I mean that roughing the long snapper penalty. I don't ever want to fault refs or anything like that. I mean, players play the game, and there are many different ways that Wisconsin lost that game, but I think that changed a bit of the complexion where you get a stop, and who knows what happens after that, but it's still a 1-score game. It was 13-7 at that point, and if they stop them there, I mean, there goes that touchdown in the 2-point conversion, and things change. So, I mean, I thought that was a big play. I think on that same drive, too, let's say that ball doesn't go out of bounds in that Reggie Pearson forced fumble. I mean, you saw, if you watch the replays, Deron Harrell is just sprinting down the sideline about ready to scoop it up. Like I said, it's what ifs, whatnot, so I'm not going to go into that game, but I also feel like that was a game-changing call by the refs, and I mean, it's not nothing against the refs. I mean, the guy fell over, and they saw what they saw, and in real time, not slow motion like we get the ability and the privilege to see afterwards. So, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely, I mean, that second half is one to forget for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. If they scoop and score that fumble, they got the lead in the third quarter. Right. Yeah, that's a completely different game at that point. But defensively, I felt like, going in, we thought the secondary would be the big issue. Dakota Dixon was ruled out right before the game. Caesar Williams actually ended up playing in the fourth quarter. I didn't even realize that at first. Oh, really? I was watching back, and I was like, oh, that's Caesar Williams. So I don't know what he's not on the injury report now, but I'm not really sure what his situation was. But he didn't play for a good portion of the game. Found Hicks goes out early. And then, of course, Scott Nelson was out for the first half, and he went out in the third quarter again. But really, I thought it was like you mentioned the read options where Patterson got the 81-yard run, and they had a couple other ones too. I think Patterson ran in a touchdown after that, and then the last touchdown was McCaffrey, the backup quarterback, who ran for 44 yards, and that was all read options where the outside linebacker seemed to just crash in on the running back and it left room up on the outside, and I thought that was a really big issue for the read option. Was just a huge issue for them in this game, but the secondary really played really well. I mean, only gave up 124 passing yards. A lot of those young guys like Reggie Pearson, with that Wildgoose, even though he got a holding call, and I thought he played relatively well. And then Burrell made some nice plays too. What were kind of your impressions of the secondary? Were you pretty surprised at some of these guys that were able to step up in this kind of spot?
Yeah, I thought it was a valiant effort. I mean, and you also had Nelson, played like one series, and then before he got injured. Yeah. So I mean, you get him back for the second half, and next thing you know, he's out for the rest of the game. Pearson, I thought, in his home state, coming back, and him and Nelson are both Michigan products, and I thought Pearson played really well. On the first offensive play, I saw him crash down almost too much, where Wisconsin's pressure helped Shea Patterson not see the tight end. But overall, he played well. He played very physical. The forced fumble, had 5 tackles. I really liked Eric Burrell. I think first and foremost with him just stepping up. There's a passion that you saw on the field. I mean, watching the game and the replay, you see him just a lot of crashing down, making the tackles. Led the team in tackles with 11, and the redshirt sophomore played last year in you saw get with the jumbo sets against opponents like Michigan or whatnot that utilized multiple tight ends. He became the third safety in like a base 3-4 look with, instead of having 2 corners, you had 3 safeties in the defensive backfield. But he really stepped up and I thought showed something. And Deron Harrell, you didn't really see a lot of with the cornerbacks outside of that one hold. You didn't hear their names being called a lot on during the game from Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, and the fact that Wildgoose had that great pass breakup in the end zone I thought that was huge for him. He played. I've talked to him a couple of times over the past 2 weeks, and we're hoping to get a story up on Bucky's fifth quarter soon about him. But just the confidence. He said after the Nebraska game that he thinks he's one of the most confident players, if not the one of the most confident players on the field when he enters the game. And so that for a true cornerback, obviously you're a cornerback, so you have to have that mentality going on one-on-one with the way Wisconsin plays a lot against wide receivers and the position in general. But there's a confidence that he has from playing in Florida and whatnot. And you showed, and he had a holding call against them in the third quarter on that one real big drive, that first drive of the second half for the Wolverines. But I thought he really asserted himself well, and I thought Deron Harrell played well, and they, for going up against guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones, they held their own. And I thought that I think it's big, and it showed the potential of the secondary underneath Jim Leonard, in that defensive backfield.
I thought Pearson's performance was really eye-opening. I mean, this is a guy that I think, his big hits stand out, but and he did, I feel like, have a couple of instances where maybe he took a poor angle or was a little over-aggressive. But, I mean, this guy's last football game was in high school that he played, and he's out there in the big house starting this game against Michigan and making some of the plays that he made. The first drive of the game, shotgun handoff, and he's 11 yards deep when the ball's handed off, and he comes up and just clocks the guy for 1 yard, for a 1 yard gain. And we already talked about the fumble he forced. That was a huge. I mean, that would have been a really huge play for the roughing the snapper call. I mean, it was a 1 yard to go. Looked like Michigan had gotten around the edge, and he just comes up and lays a big hit on him. So I thought, man, I was really surprised by his performance, and I think this is it's one of those things where you don't get to see much hitting in fall camp, and so you don't get to see exactly the full extent of his game until he actually gets in a game like this. But I thought he was really good. He
had a really solid fall camp, and you and I were there for a lot of the time. When it came to, obviously you were there for almost every practice. I think you were there for every practice. I was there for almost every practice. But I thought he's quietly had an extremely solid camp. And it showed where he was in the two deep before he got injured, before the first game of the year. Being an early enrollee, he was able to pick up that, in spring ball, pick up the defense a little bit more. And you saw him Jim Leonard was flexing through safeties and different combinations throughout all of camp too, where pairing different players up, and Pearson was up there with like Patrick Johnson, who's now departed, among others. So they get the experience there, and he looked extremely solid in fall camp. Not really flashy, almost like a Dakota Dixon in that type of strong safety for where the physicality pops out more than a ball hawking ability. But yeah, I thought he really played well on Saturday night, and obviously he's questionable this week, but we'll see if he's able to get back on the field, because I thought him and Burrell played really well as a tandem.
I think it's fitting that he's wearing Michael Caputo's old number, Reggie Pearson. Looks like he could be that kind of player.
I didn't put that together until now. I realized 7-7,
Yeah. Moving forward for this team, obviously the playoffs are gone now, and I think a lot of fans would be like, the playoffs were gone anyway. But until they lost that second game, they weren't out of it yet. And we all expected them to eventually lose that game, and now they have. But as you look forward now, what are you kind of expecting out of, if you had to sort of redo your predictions here? I don't know, what did you expect of this team before the season first, I should say? What did you have, like a record prediction or anything?
I had
like
a 10-2 record prediction. I thought it was 11-1 after spring, because I had confidence in. It was mostly at the defensive end, and I know I say it a lot, but I really feel the defensive line in the past 4 years before this season was extremely underrated, with Chikwe Obashi, Alec James, and Connor Sheehy really manning and allowing those holes to open up for the linebackers to make plays. But I liked what Garrett Rand and Isaiah Loudermilk could do, and I thought they had game experience and they would be the next up. But with Rand's injury, I remember, and then just with Quintez Cephas's legal situation with the sexual assault charges against him, and him taking that leave of absence from the team and now being suspended, I revised that from 11-1 after spring to about 10-2, and I thought the two key ones were going to be Michigan and Penn State. Now, with the BYU loss, I still think it's going to be a tough matchup at Penn State, and Penn State's not Superman either, right? They got kryptonite, and they lost last week to Michigan State. I think the games are winnable for the regular season. I think there's at least one more loss just based off of what we've seen, so maybe a 9-3. Northwestern's not going to be easy. I mean, even Illinois this week, when you face an Illini squad that, last year, played them tough, and we talked to a couple of players, like David Edwards mentioned, that just how tough they were. They looked like in the film, and it's a physical group. So it all starts this week, but there's at least one more loss out of this group. I'll stick with a 9-3 prediction overall for the regular season. I still think they have I think the loss comes at Penn State, but you also have Purdue and Northwestern, and those are going to be tough matchups against defenses that I feel could really exploit Wisconsin's into some deficiencies or areas they're not making plays.
Yeah, I think they'll lose one more game, if not two. think it's possible they lose 2 more, but I think that's Northwestern game next week is going to be really interesting. It's interesting you brought up the Illinois game as sort of something they need to watch out for this week. My initial reaction is to say, that's, there's no way they're going to lose to Illinois at home, and I don't think there is any way. But I think you got to remember too that Jonathan Taylor was out, I think, for most of that Illinois game last year. So, but it is a defense that, as bad as they've been in some of these games, they do create a lot of turnovers, and if they pick off Alex Hornibrook a couple of times, if they put some weird pressures out there, maybe who knows, maybe they stay in it for a while.
Right. I mean, they're on paper, you mentioned, they're looking bad. They're giving up almost 32 points per game, one of the worst in the nation. They're giving up over 500 yards of offense per outing, almost 200 yards on the ground. Wisconsin's offensive line should just be salivating at that notion alone.
Yeah.
They ran for 183 against Michigan, and Michigan only gave up 96.5 per game coming in. So that was a win, in my opinion, even though Wisconsin was coming into the game with almost 290 on the ground. But you're looking at, with this Illini defense, I'm not mistaken, they're tied for, they're one of the best in the nation in terms of turnovers. They create over 2 takeaways a game. They're one of the best. I think they're tied for 5th in interceptions in the FBS. So if they turn that ball over, that's going to be disastrous for this offense. And we've always talked about it throughout the before fall camp or whatnot, or for season previews. If Alex Hornibrook holds on to the ball and he doesn't throw interceptions, this offense is going to be okay, or at least have the opportunity to be okay. And so he has to watch out for that. But it's going to be very interesting. I think they're going to come out guns a-blazing and just, I think they'll win by at least 21 to 28 points on Saturday. But I also know that, Illinois' offense, 225 yards on the ground per contest, it's like 22nd in the nation, and that's huge for them. Where, their offense isn't great. I think it's around 375 an outing too, but honestly, the games run heavy, and they have a couple good backs, and then if they utilize some read option like Michigan did, you've seen Wisconsin have a hard time defending it. It could, it's going to be a challenge, I think, on the rush and going up against Illinois' rushing offense, but I do expect Wisconsin to win. It's just, I don't know if those factors, those turnovers, and the Illinois rushing attack get the better. It could make it a little interesting.
It will be interesting to see too how Alex Hornibrook bounces back. He was really bad against Michigan, and do you think there's any chance that his season goes south here? I thought he was actually pretty efficient leading up to the Michigan game. A lot of fans are calling for his head, obviously, but do you think this is just a one game, sort of like last year he was, or I guess 2 years ago he was bad against Michigan as well? Do you think it's just going up against a good defense just didn't have it for this game, or do you think this is a real problem going forward?
I think there was, with the offense, I don't think it's just on Hornibrook. I know everyone, the comment section blew up on Bucky's fifth quarter, and you're trying to moderate it. And I love our viewers and our commenters, and Badger fans are passionate, and we appreciate that too. But it's also, I think, you talk to guys like David Edwards today during player availability, and they mentioned miscommunications on the line with protection. And so, you have, running the ball, they're great, but the pass protection was not there. And then you combine that with maybe just some poor execution on Hornibrook's part. That's what creates it. That's what makes it's cliche for Paul Christ, and I'm not trying to drink his Kool-Aid per se, but it's a team game. It's all you do your 111th, and there's some pressure created there. I think it was just a bad outing where they needed him to be good to great to make it happen. And so that's going to be the next. I think he'll rebound. I don't think it's going to be just a detracting. It's not going to take him on a snowball effect. And I also know that everyone's favorite player on the team is the backup quarterback.
Yeah.
I know Jack Cohn did look great during fall camp, to the point where even Michael Dieter told me that he felt that if something would happen to Alex, that Jack would be able to come in and run the offense pretty well. That doesn't mean that they're going to run it as well as Alex Hornibrook. And so, he is the quarterback of this team, and I don't foresee him taking steps back this season. I think just because of this game, I think if there are any steps back, it's because of whatever is bringing for the defense, and then, Wisconsin shooting itself in its own foot.
Yeah, and I think for those calling for Cohn too, you got to remember they're trying to redshirt him this year, which kind of complicates this as well. If you did want to make a change at some point, but especially since you're out of the playoff race at this point, and I think you still have a pretty good chance to win the Big Ten West with Hornibrook and go into that game with a chance. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if I think he'll play well against Illinois and he'll be able to bounce. I mean, I think that the offense, like you said, was there were a lot of issues. Protection was an issue at some point. Hornibrook had some times where he had plenty of time, clean pocket, and just missed the throw too. And the pick six was inexcusable. But other times too, where receivers didn't really create the separation either. So it was kind of a team effort for their offensive failures. And I think it was a really good defense in a tough spot for a lot of those guys. And I think Hornibrook will play better this week. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how he plays though and how he bounces back. And if he continues to struggle in the next couple of games, maybe we'll reevaluate at that point. But I think right now, I think he's played pretty well this season before the Michigan game, and I think he'll bounce back pretty well. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays itself out. But
Absolutely.
thanks for joining me, Jake, and you can follow him on Twitter at I forgot your Twitter.
Oh no, it's all good. It's at Jake Coco B5Q. And also, if it's okay with you, if I could I pop something real quick?
Plug, yeah.
Okay.
Plug away.
For Walk On This Way, for those that don't know, wrote a book with former walk-on Joel Nellis. It's been 2 years since we published it. It feels like it was yesterday when I got the book in my hands for the first time. We're having a book signing on Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. at University Bookstores, 711 State Street, so right by Library Mall. If you guys are going to the homecoming parade, stop by, say hi. Working on trying to get a couple walk-ons, former walk-ons that we highlighted in the book. We're not sure if anyone will show up, but hey, stop by, say hi, talk Badgers. We'll have a good time.
I should introduce you as author as well when we start the podcast.
That's all right. but I appreciate you having me on.
Make sure you go to the book signing. I'm sure that'll be great. Well, thanks again, Jake, and we'll talk to you again at some point.
Yeah, no, anytime you need me, I'm around.
Having played in a few games now, and big number of snaps the last couple of games, how much more comfortable do you kind of feel out there now than maybe you did a few weeks ago?
I mean, I was comfortable. I think I was comfortable against Michigan since I played a lot in Nebraska games. So it's just like it's more of like not making the little mistakes. Like I'm comfortable, but like I need to like make sure I keep my eyes in the right spot, get to where I need to be, and stuff like that.
I feel like you've had a couple pass interference or holding calls. Is that something you kind of need to work on, just not being quite as handsy, or do you feel like?
Yeah, I just need to work on getting my hands low, like on the hip, instead of like high around the shoulder area.
The ref can kind of see it when it's up high, right?
Yeah.
Well, as a defensive back group, there were obviously you guys had a lot of injury issues on Saturday and leading into that game, and I think a lot of people thought from outside the program you guys were gonna struggle, but you played really well. Did you guys kind of go into that game with sort of feel like you had something to prove there, or wanted to kind of prove yourselves?
Yeah, I wanted to prove that we weren't, because everyone keeps saying Wisconsin DBs aren't that good. I hate hearing that because we work super hard, and I feel like we one of the best groups. So I was definitely trying to prove something.
Yeah. Do you feel like everyone else was kind of on that same page as you? Like, let's show them what we can do?
Yeah, everybody was on the same page.
Did you guys kind of do what you expected in that game as a defensive back? I mean, I think you held them to 124 yards passing. It seems like you guys gave up 38 points, but not a lot of that was because of you guys.
I mean, the whole defense is out there when they score, so I mean, it's not really. We don't really think of as a group we did okay. We want to win and we want to stop the team as a group, so we all take fault for it.
Yeah. When was the point since you got here where you kind of realized, okay, I can really compete on this level. I'm going to be okay here. I can compete with these guys.
Honestly, I felt like that before I even got here. I was like, I'm ready. Like whatever coach want me to do, I'm gonna do it as hard as I can, and God will handle the rest.
Was there any sort of, when you did get here, was there any first few practices? Was there any kind of shock, like, oh man, all these guys are really talented, or was it?
I mean, in Miami, everybody talented, so it just felt the same.
Yeah.
Like it just felt the same.
That's what they've gotten a lot of defensive backs from South Florida, and all of them seem to be like super confident. Whether it was Sojourn and Dante was really confident. All those guys. Like, what's it about?
Because everybody down there is good. Everybody down there is trying to dominate you. Like, so kind of like not trash talking, but like feeling like hyped about yourself is like something you need to have.
Sort of like if you don't have that confidence, you're just gonna get eaten alive, kind of.
Yeah. Like people are just gonna like make you feel bad, and like if you do bad on one play, they'll just be like, you suck, and then you can't just get like, oh, I suck. You gotta like be like, no, I'm good. Like,
yeah. What do you at this point? I mean, I know you had a lot of confidence in yourself coming in, but did you expect to be, playing a role like this as a true freshman when you first?
It was a goal. It was always a goal.
Yeah,
it was always a goal. Like, I came in, I set my mind on starting. I'm trying to help the team as much as I can. So, like, the first couple weeks I wasn't starting. So it was like, all right, season not over. I got to keep working, getting better. And then, yeah.
Do you feel like you're at a point now where, even when everyone's healthy, you're just part of the rotation? Like,
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's just no way you're redshirting at this point, even though you're at only 3 games right now, I think?
Yeah, coach told me there's no way.
Oh, he told you you're not redshirting?
Yeah.
Well, was that kind of an exciting moment that you're going to have a role the rest of the season? Or,
yeah, it was exciting. I smiled from ear to ear.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you call the family and stuff after he told you that? Or?
I try to not. I mean, I tell my family stuff, but because they hype me up a lot, I be trying to stay humble. So I just, it's like, mellow with it.
When did he tell you that?
After the Nebraska game.
Okay.
Well, before Nebraska game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Even before that, he's like, you're not going to redshirt this
Yeah.
year. What do you feel like you did to sort of impress him? From the beginning of the season where you weren't really playing much to where he's telling you, you're a guy for us now. You're not going to redshirt.
Well, like, first off, I just took coaching. Like, I really wanted to get better and get coached up. And I was working really hard to get to the spots he wanted me to get, the technique he wanted me to play, finishing how he wanted me to finish. And I just consistently did that, and then he just took notice of it.
Going forward, you guys have a lot of guys injured again in the defensive backfield. Do you still feel like, even though you guys played well against Michigan, like, do you feel like you still have a lot to prove as a group?
Yeah, we have a lot to prove for the rest of the season. People are going to think we average for the rest of the season, so we got to keep working.
That's going to do it for this week. A big thanks to Jake and Rachad for their time. We're going to do another episode of the Red Zone podcast like we do every week. On Friday, we're going to have our mailbag episode where you guys can ask me questions, and I'll do my best to answer them on the podcast here. So if you have a question for that or a topic you want me to hit on, just tweet me at Jason_Galloway, and I can get the answer in for our Friday episode. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the Red Zone on iTunes or Google Play, and keep visiting madison.com for all of your Badgers football coverage. Thanks for listening.